So today we're going to talk about animations. We're going to start putting things into Sequencer. And I'm going to go over a couple features. Again, there's no way I can go over everything in Sequencer, but I want to cover some of the more basic topics. And then maybe through office hours and through Slack conversations, we could talk about some more custom things we want to get into for the midterms. We start thinking about, because we're going to have 2 weeks to do a midterm, which is like a 2-minute animated movie, right? So I'm not going to make any art in this class. I'm demoing features. It's going to look ugly. It's up to you guys to actually do artful things. I'm just going to be showing features. So like I might not have the best camera angles and I might not have the best environment. In fact, I'm just using this environment. So you might not have, anyway, you'll get it. So anyway, so let's talk about Sequencer. Sequencer is a timeline in Unreal. And yes. There we can unmute ourselves. Thanks. Cool. Cool. So now we're recording audio also in Zoom, or we're displaying audio in Zoom. Cool. So Sequencer is nestled right here. You see this says displays a list of level sequence objects and open in the respective editors. So I can add a level sequence. All right. It is something I can name. So I have everything in my assets, and I can create a folder called level sequences. And then right now I should call this like 01 sequence. See, we could change the name later on. I like to give them, actually what I'll do is I'll just call this one first level sequencer. And then when I add it to my scene, there it is. It has a little icon. And it's a little film clapper, right? And what I like to do is, we haven't really talked about organization of the world outliner. Some of these levels get really complicated, and especially when we get to the second half of the semester, I like to organize things in folders so they're easier to find. Everything in the world outliner is alphabetized. I'm going to take my sequencer, and I'm going to right click, or actually I'm going to hit this plus button right here, and it's going to put it into a folder, and I can call that folder 00 sequencers. And it puts it at the very top. That way I can always find my sequencer. Always at the very top, it's under 00. I'll put cameras under 01 cameras, 02 actors. I'll start making a bunch of outliner folders at the very top so I can find these objects, because it gets annoying to have to keep on finding them, right? So I have these 2 different avatars. I might select both of those and say 02 actors or avatars, and then I'll put cameras inside of 01. It's just easier for me to find things at the very, very top since it's alphabetized. Cool. So I have now a timeline. You see the timeline is at 30 frames per second, and it's displaying it in frames. So if it's 30 frames per second, and there's 150 frames, how many seconds is it? 5. That was math. It was engineering school. All right. So right now I can drag, you see that the beginning line is green and the end line is red. This is the duration, this is the beginning, this is the end. I'm sure the letters I, what does that do? Puts a little thing there, I don't even know. Like I'm creating things I don't care about. Let's see the other way. Okay. So one thing I like to do to start off with is I don't like going before 0. I don't want to make any accidental negative 2 frame keyframes. I'm going to go to this little play icon and say, keep cursor in playback range when scrubbing. So now, it's really easy for me to hit 0 and really easy for me to hit 150. That's the first thing I always do when I drop in Sequencer. All right. Other things we might not like or might like is like, I don't think in frames. 30 frames per second doesn't really mean that much to me. So I might change the setting to showing time as seconds. All right. So now across the top it says 0 to 5. How many seconds is this? It's 5 seconds. That's a lot easier. I'm not doing any math anymore. So make yourself comfortable. There's lots of, if anyone who's done Premiere or After Effects, there's lots of keyboard shortcuts. Find that list of keyboard shortcuts, learn those keyboard shortcuts. You'll get much quicker at doing Sequencer for manipulating things around. You see right now I can drag and I can be at any kind of time frame I want to. You do have snapping settings, and you could say what you want to snap to. I want to snap to potentially just my keyframes. I want to snap to individual whole numbers. All that kind of stuff can be can be useful. You can also show things as time code if you need to think about things as frames and seconds. All right, so this is showing both at the same time. Right, so it's every second within 30 frames beside it. So those are good things to know. Cool. And then we can add keyframes, and then we can hit play and watch things go. All right, so let's start adding things in. All right, so anything can be animated. We have Suzanne and Suzanne, and I might want to move these, since it's going to be animated, I might want to move them up to actors. All right, something I might also animate is this rock. You can also right click and say move to actors. All right, so lots of ways to organize your outliner, and then you can throw them in. So let's throw, you can either drag them in, or we can say actor, and we have a list of outliner right here. We can throw it in that way, right? And then I have these 3 actors, and I can animate things. The first thing is it says transform by default. What is transform? Position, rotation, scale, right? That makes sense. We can keyframe those, right? So if you're familiar with After Effects, they have these little keyframe buttons. I can say I only want to keyframe location, I only want to keyframe rotation, or I can keyframe the entire transform. So let's go for the entire transform. Rock starts here. Suzanne and Suzanne 2 all have a starting position, and then potentially halfway through, say I want to make it exact, I can go over here and type in 2.5. And then let's start messing around. So I lift up rock, nothing happened. But if I come over here and say, this button right here, and say auto keyframe, if I lift up rock and I let go, you see that it's actually keyframed that. So it's auto keyframing. It might be quicker. You have to just make sure you don't make mistakes. All right, so now he's here, she's here, and then potentially we want to change scale. So right now we don't have any keyframes for scale on this character. You see that besides some items, you see that there has actually add keyframe for this property, right? So maybe my object is not simulating physics at the beginning, but then I want to add that keyframe here. So now it's added a new track called simulating physics, right? And I want to turn it on when it's at the top, and when I'm at the bottom, I want to not be simulating physics. So ideally, it's animating up over transform, and then when it simulates physics, it should fall down on its own, right? And then the other ones can come back down. That's Suzanne 2. This one will just animate back down. And then this one goes somewhere else. And now you can see the curve, right? So that's a keyframe right there. If I select on the keyframe, it's going to move this object back there. And then if I edit again, see how it changes that curve? Right? So that's how you can see that something is animated over time. Awesome. Super exciting about watching this. Let's go ahead and let's hit play and watch it unfold. Nothing. I have to tell it to play. Sequencers, by default, you can have tons of sequencers. You need to tell what sequencers to play. So how do I find my sequencer? I put it at the very top. Very easy for me to find. And the first option is autoplay. There we go. This is exactly what I wanted. I don't know what you guys are laughing about. All right. So other settings you might see is looping, right? So it can loop indefinitely, loop a certain amount of times. And you can have multiple sequencers going at the same time. You can have sequencers embedded in sequencers, and we'll get that in a couple of weeks. Other things that happen that are important to know is, so you notice when we hit play, watch the rock. When it gets done, rock goes back to where it was to start off with, right? We can also say pause at end. And what does that do? It pauses at the end. There you go. That's how you know we're doing a simulation. It's not, it's like that. So pause at end. So there's a couple of things in here that you could definitely say, like cinematic. Do you lock the mouse and keyboard so you can't get at it? So these are cinematics. These are cutscenes in video games. But we're making it. We're animating these objects. Super cool, right? So look at my list, make sure I'm not missing anything. So right now we're just animating transform, but we're also animating our physics. So I can either look at my details panel. Oh, great. Now I've done it. I can go to my details panel and I can look down here and try to find things I want to animate, or I can go over to these tracks and say add a track, and then I have a list of things I can do. Right? So, and then you have components, right? We haven't done much with blueprints. We know that blueprints are active that have many components inside of them. I can maybe do things to the actual individual components themselves, like if I go down to Suzanne, I can reference the monkey mesh itself, and then it has its own tracks, and maybe I want to animate element 0 on the material parameter, which is called color, right? So I can, although those material instances, if I make them parameters, I can actually address those in sequencer. So I can animate the glow or animate the color over time. All right, so, and remember, the element 0, that is, if I look back at the monkey mesh, and go to the details, at the very top, there's 3 different material elements: element 0, element 1, element 2. So my sclera is the one that's bright. That's the one that has glow. So that's the reason why I have option to choose glow, is because I chose material element 0. It wouldn't be there for pupil. Well, it would because it's instanced. So it would have glow because that's another reason why you instance things. So you have these parameters inside a sequencer. So everything can be animated, kind of. So I can start off with the monkey having not glowing eyes, and then as he gets angry, I'll have glowing eyes. One important shortcut is holding down Control and mouse wheeling in, that you really get in there. And I can see that I have an extra keyframe I want to get rid of. There you go. So now the monkey starts off at 0, and so the eyes start glowing. Other things worth noting are the rock. Let's make it have a track called Hidden in Game. That's just your visibility, right? Rock is there. Let's add a keyframe at the beginning. So yes, it is there at the beginning. And then it's a Boolean, so it could be off. Then it could be on. Then it could be off. Then it could be on. All right. And another one I like is attachment tracks. So here's a monkey that's animated the whole way through. We can actually go to tracks, sorry, say attach, and we can actually attach the other Suzanne to it when it's falling down. All right, so right here it's not attached, but over here it should be attached once physics is going. Oh, actually I have to zoom to where there's physics. So it'll fall a little bit, and then it'll attach itself. Let's see what happens. Let's hit play. So it starts falling, then attach itself. Right. Oh, way down. And if we find it, we can double click on it and we'll catch back up to it. Right? And see how it's now parented? But if I zoom back forward, or if I hit stop, you see that it's, so all we've done is dynamically parented it. See over there in the word outliner? So there's tons of things you can do, and they're adding more and more features. But this is some major ones. Throw in audio in here. Yeah, so the other kind of things, let's go start off with, but of course, I'm talking about us making movies and cinematics, so let's get into camera work, right? So go back to the beginning and add our camera. There's a little camera icon right here. It's going to do two things for us. So of course, we could just throw in a camera and then throw a camera into the sequencer, but this just puts it in for us. And there you go. And we're now in a camera viewport. It's where I had the camera itself. We see this now that we can see this icon right here. It's called, this is our camera cuts view. So we can have multiple cameras, but this first camera cuts track is what chooses which camera, right? Right now I have a camera that's kind of nowhere. All right, I'm going to lock into it. So one thing you might notice is it says pilot active. So that's one thing I want to point out is that it's piloting and active. And there's this lightning bolt next to it, which means it's spawning. It actually doesn't live in the world. It's being spawned dynamically into the world. This is important because I could take the sequencer with this camera and I could throw it to any world and it will spawn the camera. It doesn't have to actually possess the camera that's already in there. I can convert this to being possessed. Somewhere, convert to possessable, and then it actually lives in the world. And then if I upload the sequencer to another map that doesn't have this camera, it won't be connected. We're going to deal a lot with that when we do live recording. Something to be aware of is that spawnable things don't live in the world, and the sequencer can take them with them around different maps. And sometimes you want to be possessed inside the world. Usually, like we want to possess the actors, like the actual avatars, because you don't want to have multiple actors activating themselves at one time. It gets confusing. We'll get into that in more detail. Just know that's what that lightning bolt means. I can also just add a camera to the world. Right. So we're actually been working with cinematics. So we're now using a Cine camera. So now if I add a cinematic camera in here, we'll see that there's no lightning bolt because I haven't, it's actually in the world itself. I could drag it in here. And then halfway through the take, I can choose camera number 2. I've now done a camera cut track. Right. So it says camera actor 1, camera actor 2. And then if I wanted, like, oh, I really love this, and I want it to be spawnable so I can bring it to their map because I love these camera moves, I can then convert to spawnable, and now it has the lightning bolt next to it. So again, when I lock it in to the camera cuts track, I can then see where these things are. And then if I lock into the actual camera itself, it says I'm piloting it. And quite literally, this means that as I move it around, I'm actually moving it to where I want it to be. So I'm going to zero it out because I started these both out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So I'm going to reset these values, and then let us go to this camera actor and let's find something to look at. Oh, there's something to look at. So that's a good framing for beginning. I got thirds, right here. And I'm going to put this as my transform. And then let's go over to the other one. All right, so this is looking at this one. And then let's go to our next camera. Select it. And now I'm piloting camera number 2. And maybe I want to get a little bit more of a wider shot because now things are moving a little further. So I'm going to keyframe that one on the transform. Go back to my camera cuts track. 1, 2. Right? So I can have many cameras in here, but it's the camera cuts track that's also called the director track. It's what's choosing which camera I'm switching between on each one. And should I need more time on my track, I can always increase the distance here. Now it's 6 seconds. And then I just remember to elongate my camera cuts track. Or I can bring in more cameras. Right? I can also, underneath my play options, choose that I want my actual take to be 10 seconds long. It'll automatically increase the distance of here. I can take another camera. Add it in. And now we have a camera actor again. And again, now I have to kind of elongate a lot of other tracks to make sure they're all there. Below track. Cool. And then at 5 seconds in, exactly 5, I'm going to choose the next camera actor. Cool. And you can see how you should like name them appropriately because it makes it easier to find. Maybe it's like left shot or right shot or wide shot, medium shot. Right. And then to make it easier on myself, I'm gonna take my cameras and I'm gonna put them in their own folder called O1 cameras. And now it's easy for me to find them to navigate around. You can see right now that as I select a camera, it makes little previews of what they're doing. You can change how big these previews are in the settings. You look it up. It's just like window resolution or something like that. You can make them small, big. I know on Macs they make them like by default really, really big. And then you can also pin them. So I can pin it so it never goes away no matter what I select. And it's always there. There's like a little pin icon right here. Get off. And then when I'm not selecting a camera, it goes away and it's not showing me a preview of what it's looking at. Cool. So you want to be very, very careful of when you're piloting a camera, and especially when you have auto keyframe on, because you forget that you're piloting it. You're like, oh, I could look at another asset. And you're like, oh crap, I just auto keyframed that camera. So now you have some ridiculous thing coming in. All right. So be careful when you're piloting that you can eject right here or just select another track. All right. Didn't really matter. It's a slight move. Cool. Straightforward so far. Also, you can do folders inside your sequencer. Again, we haven't even really looked at a lot of these things. There's a lot of different tracks. We can add in a folder, and I can make a folder for cameras too. If I have a second monitor, I like to put my entire sequencer on the second monitor because it takes up a lot of real estate after a while. Right? So now all the cameras are in the folder. I twirl it down, and I can also do the same thing with my actors. Keep things civilized. All right, so we've seen we can animate parameters. You can, all sorts of things are in here that we haven't really had a chance to jump into yet. Jump out of here. In my settings here, let's see if I can figure out, remember where this is. You can go to cinematic viewport, and then you can lay in your grid. So this could also be useful for you for lining up your camera cuts as well. So you can frame things that way. And then you have your play controls up here. And you're looking at your rule of thirds. So there we go. We're like literally doing the thing that we're talking about. We're able to overlay it. There's a few other ones. You have other options there. And then turn that back off. I can go to default viewport. And then we get a little more screen real estate for moving things around inside the viewport. Cool. The elephant in the room is, yes, we do have animations in here. So here is a character. I can, again, either select it from, up here. Oh, sorry, wrong button. From doing track and say actor to sequencer and select it here. There's one that's highlighted. It gets dumped in. Let's bring it back. Let's jump out of there and be able to take a look at it. Underneath my skeletal mesh, there's different track options, but by default, there's also animation track. And here's where I can load in different animations, right? So I had a swimming animation. Let's see where he went. At least I thought I had a swimming. Oh, there he is. So swimming. What's some other tracks we have? Let's go over to here, add another animation. Or let's go further off so it doesn't overlap. What's another one? We had treading, right? So maybe we want him to swim, tread, and then swim. Move this over here, moves over here. He's treading at the beginning. And then I can actually cross it over and it makes a transition. See, it has a little curve right there we can edit later on. So he's in floating, and then he starts going to a swim. Treading, swim. Now, right now, these are in place. They're not moving anywhere. It's better to do it this way because if they actually move places, they're going to snap back every time, right? So it's better to do this and then animate the transform. So he's in place here, and then maybe right when we start transitioning, take his transform and keyframe it, and then keyframe it, and then he's there, and then he starts swimming, right? And then if you want to see how that is animated, I think I've almost done every button here. There's curve editor, and I can select my character, look at the transform, look at location, and we can see our curves. All right, we can animate and adjust things there. Like I want him to come down a little bit as he's treading, right? Or like he's above surface, and I want to maybe be above surface while he's actually swimming as well. I can add in a keyframe for Z, which is the vertical. Actually, that was a pin. I had a keyframe here. And then what do I do to Z? I lost him. Okay, I can move him up. I'm just looking for the track so you can actually animate the curve itself. Let's go to Z. Oh, not selecting it. There we go. I can also see I'm right clicking here. Holding Control. I can animate just by curving things around. It's there and there. Now it's swimming above water, and I can adjust that. Cool. And this is by default a curve. Anyone who's done any animating, you know that you can have linear curves, all these different options for how you transition in between all the different keyframes. It definitely helps to have had experience in things like After Effects and Premiere when you're doing this kind of stuff. Cool. We have motion capture data. I don't have it loaded in. I don't think let's see, I do have it loaded in. Let's see. Let's choose this fellow, drag him in, and let's see what animations we have. Animation, we do indeed have beaches. So we now have this long take for motion capture data. And you see this is animating in place, right? Or it is not animating in place. This is actually has a position offset. I'm going to trim, right click, edit, trim to the right, and therefore I have a little empty space here. You see how it slaps back? It comes back. I can make it hold the last frame somewhere. When finished, keep state or restore state. I can overlap the project default. Get all the properties I have. I can change the play rate, make it go faster, make it play in reverse. Trim it here. I'm also going to just add in another animation take. And I have let's see what this one's going to look like. This is the other performer of that take. Right? So this one was on the right side, and this is on the left side. And if I blend them together, it's going to junk, right? Not the most useful thing. And this is why it's easier to animate sometimes in place. But if I take this transitional area, this crossfade, and right click, I can say match bones. And this works maybe 10% of the time. I'm going to see what bones are important. So right here, we're on our right foot. So I'm going to match bones from right foot If anything else, this class is an anatomy class where you learn about the bones of the body. So now it keeps going. So we've added a transition. This is something straight from Motion Builder. And you can do this much easier Motion Builder, much better. But basically, I'm building off of transitioning from this bone. Don't transition back to the frame 0, find out where my right foot bone is and animate from there. So you can make seamless transitions with your mocap data here. So he's taking a right step here. Oh, so we go back. Right step here. And that right foot pretty much stays still, right? The left foot moves around a little bit. So this is a little bit of guesswork, but if like they're doing a handstand, you make the transition on the bone. If the other foot's on the ground, I'd make the transition. Let's see what happens when I match this with the left foot instead. So the right foot, I do left foot. Then it's going to kind of keep position with the left foot, right? That looks a little more natural, actually. Sometimes you have to guess. So that's really cool. That's something that was only in Motion Builder, and now Unreal's added in. That makes it a lot easier, again, trying to remove Motion Builder. So we have 2 takes happening. I think that's really exciting. Makes me happy. Some other things you can do, which are fun and quick and easy, is I can add in a camera, and then I can add this camera track. I can attach to, which way is it going to go? I'm going to attach to James. I'm going to attach to James' head. And then I'm going to zero it out. So now I have a POV from James. Jump out. Ah! You see, somehow inherited some sort of weird scale bug. So 0.01, 0.01, 0.01. So then I can orient to get a POV. This is all wonky. Something like that. That's in world settings. I could do local settings. It'd be easier to do it that way. Yeah, it looks a little easier to do. So now I go back into that camera track. Getting rolled nice and close up there. Let's see. Zero out. Hi. Hi. He's not really looking at anything. That's the problem. So if we put, I don't know, what do I got from Quixel? Mega scans, 3D assets. I'm going to put a giant rotten tree stump in front of him. I said giant, not tiny. That was too big. I got over zealous. Now we could probably see a POV. Right, so now we can see that he's looking at something, right? So now we're doing POV shots. I showed you how to do camera cuts. I think the last thing to show really is we can do, I'll do blueprints later on. I think that one thing we should show to get this, because it's kind of an interesting concept and it could be kind of complicated, is to come up with the idea of material parameter collections. And yeah, so for right now, for your homework, once you have your camera cuts all locked in, you can go over here and say render this to a video. Do it to like a JPEG or a PNG sequence, and then just export it out. I'm going to show you how to do a better quality render for your midterm. This is just good for the homework assignment, just to render out a quick video. It'll go to your saved folder or exports folder inside your project. So JPEG, there's no audio involved. This is at 720p. I can make it HD if I want to, or 4K. Where do I want to save it? And then just hit capture movie, and it will capture movie, and you can find those images put together in Premiere, After Effects, and have your movie. So that's one way to show a video. You can always hit F11 and go full screen and screen record. All right, if I hit the G button, it gets rid of all my cinematic objects or my game objects. G for game objects brings them back. All right, F11 comes back at a full screen. And let's introduce the idea of material parameter collections. So what we've been doing are individual parameters that are only inherited from sequences, from instances. But if we want to, we can make a parameter that can drive everything in the entire scene. What if the whole scene you want it to glow, everything you want to glow, everything you want it to, every light you want to dim or to fade in or out. So I'm going to make my first material parameter collection. We'll come back to this. We call it MPC in class. And then we make our parameter tracks. So I could have a scalar, which is an individual item. I can call it glow, right? And it could by default be 1. I can have vectors, which are 3s. I can call this one potentially color. And I want to start off with white. And let's dive into, so let's hit save. And let's dive into lights. So there's another kind of material that we haven't gotten into. So I wonder this. Let's do this. So I'm going to call this one M, or I'm going to call this one LF, which is called light function. And we'll call this one intensity. So there's another kind of material that we haven't done yet called a light function. You see that we have surface, volumes, post-processes. We're going to do a light function, and it's just about the brightness. Whenever you see strobing on a light or some flickering, this is a light function, right? If you give it a video track, you can do shadows. My first piece I did, we did a shadow puppet scene, and it was all light functions. So we're just going to put in a parameter here. I'm going to go for MPC. I go for parameter. Collection parameter. Choose my collection, and then choose the so we chose glow from a material parameter collection. Save that. And now on our sequencer, we can start adding in material parameter collection track. So we have access to global values all throughout the entire project. Glow and color. So I'm going to add in some point lights. So lights, point light, come to me. So if I go down to my point light, there's a section for light function material. Throw it in there. And now in my sequencer, I'm driving global values. So we have 1 there. We can come back over. Right, so we're affecting every single light that has that light function. So you could fade out with using like an exposure, but you can also just make it so every single light transitions in or fades out. Right, if I were to put this on my light source 2, can I? Let's see. Yeah, can. We'll get more into this a little bit later on. Now we can see that the global lights also should fade in and out. Its intensity is just a little bit higher to start off with. So that's just an introduction to the idea of global parameters. They're cool for like adjusting saturation for everything at once or post-processing all at once. We'll get into it more in depth. I just want to introduce the concept. So I am going to, any questions for this for right now?